Welcome in, Bears fans, to another episode of Bare Bones. We wish it was under better circumstances, but it is wrapping up a season, another one of disappointment, one that started with relative excitement. I mean, I think I was and you were at the beginning of the season, right, Danny?
Yeah, I mean, and truth be told, they kind of met expectations, just not in the way it was supposed to feel, kind of thing. Just not in the way it was supposed to feel, right? Like they started bum slaying at the end, and they got to I think their over under for Vegas was what 6.5 or 7.5,
I think it was, yeah.
and they hit 7. They kind of hit expectations. Like there's a reason Vegas is very good at this, guys. Like you can obviously make if this then that. Well, yeah, if your horse had an engine, it'd be a car. Like you can do these what if games all the time, but the fact of the matter is they did live up to expectations, and it just doesn't feel as good as it should because we didn't see what we wanted out of the team, specifically offensively. I think everyone would have rather just had the 32nd ranked off defense and seen the third year leap, as it were, out of Justin Fields. Instead, we saw marginal growth and not enough of what we truly wanted to see out of the quarterback.
It's interesting, hitting on that point where Justin ended up falling, because by most metrics, right, he's a bottom third of the league quarterback right now, whether you're looking at just straight up or even advanced for the most part.
As a passer, yeah.
As a passer, as a pure passer. Good note on that. And if he was top middle third of the league, where would this team be? So it's interesting to look back at where we were thinking, oh, they're going to be a 6, 7, 8 win team, and seeing where they ended up. And like, if you slid Justin up and if he was able to, where they'd end up. The maths is interesting on that thought process.
It is. And like I said, it doesn't feel how you think it should feel, especially because I think just because especially when you factor in that first month of the season and everything that went down, like I know we're going to get to the press conference more, but I love that the fact that they brought up that they navigated tough waters or whatever. It's like, you really can't bring up the fact that you lit the house on fire and then chose to run into the on fire house. Like, oh, we faced so much adversity. Like, what is this? When a stranger calls, the call came from inside the house. You're the reason for your own adversity.
Yeah, whether it's trading away, Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, Roquan Smith, whether it's the design of the offense in that first year under Matt Eberflus and
the coaches you hired,
yep,
that caused the animosity within. Like, I get it. We're going to get to it all, guys. Yeah. Believe me.
So we'll dive into this press conference. I pulled some quotes, probably too many to be honest, but so I'll jump around and so I'll read them off and then kind of we'll talk about them a little bit. But first regarding Eberflus's leadership, right? Because Matt Eberflus is back as the Chicago Bears head coach. Pohl said, "We had some adversity early in the season. In the middle of the season, his ability to stand strong and keep them together was incredible. His ability to adapt and adjust as we went along. He had a sudden change in terms of his role, and I thought we benefited from that. I thought we got better from that point. And as Danny talked about earlier, just in terms of his leadership and stability, I really think that the head coach needs to be able to captain the ship when the seas are stormy and really keep everything settled. When you go through hard times, he can keep everyone together. To me, that's like the critical piece. In a big market like this, you have to be strong. I mean, if he's jumping off the boat and everyone else starts to jump off the boat, it's a hot mess. So the stability was a big piece of it." What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think you can read that almost two ways depending on your own confirmation biases, right? You could read that as that's totally Justin Fields staying. This is the endorsement. He helped navigate the ships when everything was kind of starting to be under duress within Hallis Hall. Or you could read it as, is he calling out a certain quarterback prospect who's had some character smoke starting to billow about him as he leaves the Trojan program, Like, hey, man, we might be gearing up to take you. You better get your mind right, because this fan base, this city, it's not very forgiving at times.
Yeah, it was interesting because definitely multiple times in this press conference, Bulls talked about the big market in terms of being able to handle that. Again, it kind of depends on how you want to take it, but the truth is it is tough. It's hard to be a player in a market such as Chicago. The other thing too is it's tough. I was definitely, and I still kind of am, in the fire Matt Eberflus camp. I think it was not as much of an Eberflus issue as much as I just kind of wanted a reset of the trajectory that the Bears had created, where you always have a piece lingering that, and the cycle of suck where, lame duck head coach, the quarterback's left over, something of the nature. But I do understand to an extent what Poles is going after. And also because Warren talked about it a little bit too. I don't think I pulled that quote, but Warren talked about how one of the reasons they kept Eberflus was that continuity and how, they did see growth and how you don't want to be jumping from like head coach to head coach. And the ones that you've seen have been sustained success. Now, obviously you take like a Mike Tomlin who's never had a losing record in 17 years. It's easy to not move from your head coach, but at the same time, we knew what this was going to be. We just talked about it. They full reset in Matt Eberflus's first year. And I do kind of agree, as some have said, that if you're trying to talk about keeping Justin and give him a pass for that year, don't you do the same for Eberflus?
I mean, and to some extent, they're just held to a different standard. Like,
is that fair? That
no, it's not.
Poles creates a roster that is unwinnable, and Eberflus takes this dinky tugboat of a ship trying into these seas.
No. I mean, but professional sports and to an even more grandiose extent, life ain't fair. Like I would love to see Justin back. I know it's probably, we'll call it non-zero to be nice that he is back. Like I keep seeing and even having people that I've talked with in my personal life who are like, well, what if they take a quarterback in the first with one of those first round picks? It's like, you're not doing that. You're inherently causing a divide. I think the big issue that we're running into here when it comes to Justin Fields, especially, is they didn't use the number 1 overall pick on a quarterback last year, right? You passed on those guys. If you do it again with the trade down, you're passing on these guys, and there's still no connection truly from this quarterback to this front office and coaching staff. So that's where I think it gets really murky for Justin Fields. And the reason Matt Eberflus is getting a pass, because he is the handpicked coach. We know that now. All these stories earlier in the year, I think we can just kind of throw them away, of this coach being forced on Ryan Poles when things were starting to get tough. Like we had the report, I believe it was from the CBS or ESPN article, that said Poles, when hired, had the autonomy to expand the search outside of these 3 candidates, and he chose not to. He had the chance again to potentially move on with 2 years remaining, according to Brad Biggs, on this initial deal, and he chose not to. This is his coach, like it or not.
I push back on that slightly, in that if you got a brand new job, like, hey, you're being hired, and you have this committee that's saying, hey, by the way, these are the 3 people that we would like you to hire. If you really want to bring someone in, you can. We'll look at them, we'll put them through the ringer, but these are the 3. I'm obviously paraphrasing. I have no idea how the conversation went. These are the 3 that we want you to hire. Like, I don't know that. Am I really going to bring in another candidate at that point? I almost feel like you feel like, no, I got to pick from these 3. I think that's a little tough situation you're put in. Okay,
sure. Then, but now you've got the sample size. You've got your data points after 34 games of this.
Oh, and now he's committed to him. I mean,
now they're okay. That's more what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Like we can't no longer, like, as far as I'm concerned, this is Flus V2. He's going to have a new coordinator on offense. He's going to have a new coordinator on defense. He's going to have a whole new offensive staff outside of Chris Morgan, it sounds like.
So do you think – so let's say – I'm going to give you 2 different scenarios, and you just kind of yes or no.
Shoot.
Let's say and both of them are going to be you draft a new quarterback, because that's the only time I think it's really relevant. You draft a new quarterback, and you have 4 wins. I don't know why. You have 4 wins. Does Flus – is he safe? And if so, if he's not, is Poles safe? And then the second situation is, I mean, they go whatever, kind of more or less the same. I mean, maybe like they get 9 wins or whatever the case may be. Like, so let me go first. Is Flus safe if you get 4 wins with a rookie quarterback at the helm, or is he gone?
I think if there's only 4 wins next year with a rookie quarterback, I think they're cleaning house, period.
So you're saying both Flus and Poles would be gone.
I think it'd be over with. You can't. That's a massive regression when you're going to be having a 4th place schedule.
So then, what if you go back to the second option I was kind of saying, where it's more or less the same. You basically took Justin out, you replaced him with a rookie, and got the same production.
Yeah, I think that's forgivable.
So then your Flus is back.
Flus is back.
Okay.
But I also think, we'll get more into this later, I think you've put yourself into this weird corner of this lame duck coach where you either had to fire him or you're almost forcing this, like you might have to tack a year onto his deal to attract good coordinators.
That's something we got to dive into because it's an interesting scenario, the pros and cons of this offensive coordinator job. Switch to Warren for a second here. So Kevin Warren said on the stadium, the state of the franchise. I know for me, I'm a very quiet, impatient person. I don't voice my impatience, but I am extremely impatient. I'm competitive. I want to win, but I also want to do it with integrity and style and grace and class and humility. Now, two combos. One's the stadium and one's winning a football game. What do you think about that regarding the stadium? And what do you think about that in terms of keeping Flus in terms of he calls himself impatient?
I don't know because I don't know his role really.
Yeah, is he really?
I don't know how. I genuinely don't know how empowered he is to be the president of football, or is he just a more verbose, well-spoken, more powerful feeling individual than Ted Phillips ever was? Because his presence, the way he carries himself, is definitely night and day in comparison to what Ted Phillips was, right?
Well, it's because he washed his car this morning.
He meditated, he prayed, he's been up since 3:30. He's one of these guys that cuts his day into 3 days somehow by manipulating time and space. He's that guy. Oh my God. I like Kevin Warren. I have no reason to dislike him right now. But I don't know what his thoughts mean if I don't have like any baseline or essence of thought of what he does there, because it feels like at this moment he's focusing almost purely on the stadium. He's a competitive guy. I'm sure he wants to see the Bears win, and he made it sure that we all know he's taking notes, but it doesn't feel like anything's really changed. It's just the way it went about. The way they went about this press conference, with the exception of George McCaskey not talking, felt just very Bears, right?
Yeah, it's a valid point. I don't know how big of a seat at the table that Kevin Warren has, obviously, compared to, because it was a weird, again, very Bearsy. You had Ryan Poles, then you bring in Kevin Warren late. So is Warren above him in all decisions? Just stadium? Is there football? Was Kevin Warren pounding the table to let Flus go? We have no idea. But in terms of the stadium, Bears staying in Chicago. Kevin Warren said, "What intrigues me about downtown is I strongly believe Chicago is the finest city in all the world. Very rarely do you get the opportunity to have such a beautiful downtown with a vibrant business community, with an absolute beautiful lake and the energy that goes along." Is there reality to that? Is there a chance that the stadium is built and the Chicago Bears stay in Chicago? Or is this a, hey, Arlington Heights, get your ish together statement?
I think it can be a bit of both, but more trending towards, hey, give us what we want because we're being cheap, Arlington Heights. Like, I don't think Arlington Heights and what's being purported out of there, that they're anywhere near in the wrong for what they're asking for. They want the Bears to pay their share, and the Bears don't want to, because, as has been well documented by several different people, the Bears' family wealth does not lie in the fact that they're Josh Harrison worth $8 billion in liquid assets and cash.
Jerry Jones, oil moguls.
They are a family-run business whose team is worth $5-6 billion, and they don't really have cash on hand to do things like this. That's why they're looking for the public handout. And the Bears don't want to pay for it all on their own because they literally just can't.
Yeah, and for those who aren't as well versed in terms of what's happening with that whole Arlington Heights situation, the Bears own the land, but the tax went up, right? The property tax skyrocketed. It was like as soon as they bought it, the Arlington Heights was like, "Oh, just kidding." Now it's this. So the Bears feel like they got the wool pulled over their eyes. Arlington Heights is like, I mean, you got the big pockets, and it's this standoff right now.
Yeah, it's like a staring contest. Who's going to blink first?
In terms of the quarterback situation, to draft or to not draft a quarterback, Ryan Poles said, "We are in information gathering mode right now. We are going to turn over every stone to make sure that we're going to make a sound decision for our organization. I did think Justin got better. I think he could lead this team, But at the same time, there's a unique situation where I have to look and our staff has to look at everything. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And that's the same with free agency. We're going to look at our free agents. Me and my personal staff do evaluations and make the best decision we can for this organization to take the next step. Eberflus talked about Justin. We love where Justin is right now. He's done a good job growing the interceptions, keeping those down, the sack totals. He's doing a good job with that, having his eyes down the field. He's done a wonderful job with that, of being able to deliver some strikes down there, and he'll continue to grow as we grow as a football team. Does any of this matter?
I kind of just want to say no. It sounds like it's just a way of keeping Justin's value as high as possible if they choose to move on. That's what that sounds like to me, but...
And I think there's truth. I think there's truth to what Ryan Pohl said.
No, he's not
information
he's
gathering,
not,
right? He's not lying to anyone.
No, he's not lying to you. He's not telling you the whole truth, but he's not lying to you.
And they're definitely in any situation decision that any of us make. If we're deciding what dog to get, which by the way, I'm getting a dog on Tuesday, but that's a whole.
Oh, congratulations, buddy!
You're leaning towards a certain breed of dog. You're leaning towards, if you're looking at a litter, there's one that maybe has your eye more than another one. But that doesn't mean you're set, right? Maybe you do go to the breeder ultimately for that last check, and then this one that you didn't realize all of a sudden does speak to you a little bit more. The same could be said here. They're leaning one way or the other, whether it's a rookie or Justin. They're not telling you. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to get more information that maybe changes stuff as we go down the road. As Danny talked about earlier, the whole being able to handle the Chicago. And I don't know if I pulled the quote on this one, but being able to, the person really matters for Ryan Poles. And Justin's a great person. There's maybe some question marks about some of the rookies or rookie in this draft. So all that's going to matter.
Mm-hmm. I think they're just going to do their due diligence. And I also think, I'm sure you're going to get to the 4 quarterbacks quote that Courtney Cronin called him out on. I think that specific quote is being very much just completely overanalyzed, but we'll get there.
It's so we'll get there. Okay, so why would an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator candidate want to come here? Right, it's a very mid-average team. Flus claims though he's gotten multiple calls on both. Eberflus said, I think they're both very attractive based on the personnel we have and based on the rise of the team, and you can certainly see that the progress. And as we can visit with these guys, we'll be able to see that. We're always aware of other people's rosters and where the vision for the team is going, and ours is definitely in a positive way. He said the defensive staff has been retained, along with offensive line coach Chris Morgan, tight ends coach Jim Dre, and an assistant offensive line coach Luke Steckel. Danny, what do you take from that? And is the offensive coordinator job hurt by the fact it's like you're getting 3 people shoved at you, or is it bolstered too much by some of the positives of the job?
I think so are we only diving into the offensive coordinator at this point?
No, do both.
So defensively, I think it's a lot more appealing, especially with the route that we're going, with defensive guys even getting a shot at head coach anymore. Like, we've only heard Aaron Glenn and Mike McDonald, I think, being pulled for interviews.
And let's be completely honest, Aaron Glenn's getting interviews because of the Rooney Rule.
Yeah, which I can only imagine how that feels. I couldn't even begin to empathize with that. It's the way of the league, unfortunately, and what a rule constructed in good faith is just being used as a checkbox.
Yep.
But I don't know. I feel like I know he wouldn't be the most popular name, but like a Mike Caldwell would interest me for that job because he comes from the 40 front with the Niners and the Jets under Saleh, and you'd be taking over a unit that I think is probably going to be at the very least like a top 7 or 8 unit next year.
Does Matt Eberflus need to be calling plays for you?
He doesn't need to be. I think that's the thought process, that we think that's going to happen. But if he wants to be the best head coach he can be, calling plays and being the primary game planner for a defense, you're going to have oversights. It's the same thing as when everyone I maintain, even if you go offensive head coach guy, being the primary play caller and the guy that does the game design and the walkthroughs and the play implementation, that takes away from your oversight of the whole team. Not many guys can successfully call plays, be the offensive play caller or the defensive play caller and be the CEO. It's a very, very hard balance, and not many guys do it well.
And on top of that, now it's going to be almost even harder to do that, or even go the other way, because now, after being burned in a way by the whole Alan Williams situation and seeing the success that you, Matt Eberflus, had when you decided to call plays, to hand the keys back over after someone crashed your car, it's going to be really tough.
It is. And it almost leans to like, doesn't it feel like the odds on move is going to be like, we'll talk to a couple people, but just moving Phil Snow into that role and keeping play calling?
He's already there. The biggest question, I think, for Snow becomes how much does he want the day-to-day grind of being a DC?
Yeah, because he's what, 66 years old, I think? 65 years old, something like that?
And even Matty Eberflus talked about that. He said, I need someone who's going to be in the defensive coordinator room, like leading the room when I'm in the quarterback's room and I'm in the offense room and I'm being the CEO role. So whoever's signing up for DC, I mean, you're signing up for DC.
Right. You're going to be running it's your defense.
Yeah.
That you may just have the play calling stripped from you on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays.
Yeah, that sounds fun. That's the best part of it. And then in terms of the offense now, so some of the pros and cons, right? Pro, for an offensive coordinator, you get to have a say in who might get taken at 1-1 or even have a say in Justin Fields. Pro, it's a launching point potentially to a head coaching job. Con, maybe your head coach gets fired in a year or two.
Yeah, I think the pool for offensive coordinator is going to be much drier than we all think. Like, we all see the fact that you're going to be able to choose between Drake May and Justin Fields and Caleb Williams and maybe to a lesser extent Jaden Daniels if someone falls in love with him, because it sounds like he's starting to skyrocket up people's boards too. But there's just something about like the lack of, like, if you go there and these kids aren't the cat's pajamas, or Justin Fields doesn't take the leap if he, for some reason, is the guy they choose, what does that make you look like if you underperform and then you get canned because the Bears put you in this predicament? It's a really weird balance, which is why I said, because of the corner the Bears have backed themselves into, you almost have to extend Eberflus to get the best hire, which would then lead to the best course of action of developing your new quarterback or continue Justin's development. Like, and I just don't know that they're going to do that.
The thing about this current situation too is, more so than I think previous years, I wouldn't say the Bears are in an advantageous position where there's a couple of names of offensive coordinators available that check boxes that don't normally get checked, right? Because normally your concern is, I don't want a guy that hasn't called plays in the NFL before. But it's hard to not do that. It's hard to find that. If you're successful, you're either still calling plays or you're a head coach candidate, or the other way where you're a retread and you're like, well, I don't want someone that got fired from doing it because he didn't do a good job. So why would you do a better job here?
Yeah.
Now, and we'll get to it, but there are a couple of names that kind of float between the two where they're not necessarily retreads, but they're also not necessarily like they've called plays before.
Yeah, they're not really hot commodities.
Yeah, for some reason or another, and maybe they're willing to take a risk in this situation because they need that step up to potentially be a head coach or something.
Correct. Yep.
This is the part now where you were talking about earlier, polls on whether or not an incoming OC needs to know the plan for a quarterback, right? Like when you're in those interviews, do you need to tell them, hey, we're taking a rookie. Hey, we're looking at this rookie. Hey, we want Justin back. Poll said, I love it because you have to tell us what you are going to do for these 4 different types of quarterbacks. I want to hear that. And it's really important to see the versatility and the adaptability in their teaching and the way they implement a plan, scheme, adjust. Now, on top of that, in interviews, you can't give away your plan. You can't be like, hey, we're going to take a quarterback. It's between these two. Who would you like and what's the plan? Because, one of these OC candidates that does get the job runs back to their team and says, oh, by the way, the Bears are taking Drake
X, Y,
May.
or Z. Yeah.
And on top of that, you already have Ian Cunningham, who is going to be walking out the door soon and potentially to the Commanders who have the second pick. I mean, it's already a funky situation there.
Yes, it is.
But with that being said, right, I do think it's weird that he said 4 types of quarterback. Now, you could take it so many different ways. It could be, but the fact he specifically said 4.
Yeah, but does it mean 4 first-round grades? Is it 3 first-round grades in May, Daniels, and Williams? Is it literally stylistically? You can kind of boil down how guys play quarterback to 4 separate styles of quarterback.
Which is true, yeah.
Like, I just don't know how to take it. And like, again, there's a lot of confirmation bias going on in here of what you're taking what you want to hear and how you want to hear it. Like, and big ups, props, however you want to say it, to Courtney Cronin for really like having that catch her attention and being like, hey, Ryan, what the hell does that mean? What did you mean by 4? Like, and then force him to elaborate on it. Like, but I don't know what it means. And I don't really think it's worth spending all of our time dissecting a quote where it might have just been a misspeak. Or maybe he told you exactly what he said.
Right, because it doesn't really matter. Like, let's say we all of a sudden could pin down exactly what he meant. And it was, in fact, like, here are the 4. It's Drake May, it's Caleb Williams, it's Jaden Daniels, and it's keeping Justin. If that was the 4 for the sake of argument, it doesn't really matter. I mean, because that makes sense. It makes sense for them to dive into, hey, what are your plans for a rookie in general? What are your plans for these rookies what do you think of the rookies that you've seen, right? Because you've been a part of this a little bit. The other layer being, what do you think of Justin, and how would you make Justin work if you went that way? Give us your spiel. I mean, that's what all coordinator interviews and all head coach interviews, for that matter, are. That's what Matt Eberflus had to do when he was saying, this is what I would do with my plan for Justin last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say it's a fun quote. Read into it what you will, but I wouldn't start over analyzing it until we know more.
One thing I do find to be interesting, and you hear this a lot when you listen to some of the scouts really talk, when you hear the Dane Bruglers, when you hear the Robert Mays, Nate Tices of the world, especially the athletic groups, that a lot of these coaches haven't really even fully dove into the film yet because the season just ended, and because they're every week that they're Monday or Sunday night into Monday, they're looking at the next week. So let's say, for the sake of argument, I'm just going to take a name, Shane Waldron. How much has he really watched Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Penix tape so far this year?
He probably hasn't.
You don't have time. You're
Right.
playing the season. So I'm curious as to what that interview is even going to be. Like, give us a quick spiel on what you think for Caleb Williams, who you've watched very little tape for.
Yeah, like, hey, I've watched 2 broadcast games of this guy in passing. Here's my thoughts. Like,
so that's to go to your point, like 4 different types of quarterback. Like, no, they shouldn't roll into this interview and have a plan for every individual college quarterback if that's kind of the way you might be going, because there shouldn't be. You were looking at the year.
Yep.
Moving on, just going to throw a couple quotes out here that I think are important just for listeners to have, and then a couple more to react to. Jalen Johnson, contract and free agents, right? Brian Pohl said, I feel really good about the situation. Jalen's not going to go anywhere, and we'll work through it to get something done. Sounds like it should. Jalen said the same thing. Brian Pohl said the same thing. It should get done. We're just going to table that until it happens. One thing that was more interesting, though, when they were talking about free agents, they talked specifically about Darnell Mooney. He said, yeah, Mooney wishes he played a little better this year and things went better for him, made some more connections, but I know he's going to bounce back and have a really good year. And something to the effect of, he might have to go out, look for a deal, and then potentially, circle back once the market kind of gets settled. Hearing that, if they're moving on to if they move on to rookie quarterback, does it make sense for the Bears to bring a Darnell Mooney back? Because just locker room connectivity and giving him another shot because they're saying it was a Justin issue or a Getsy issue and not a Mooney issue?
Yeah, I mean, for the right number. I don't think he's going to get near what he wants.
How could you? I mean, like, just based on what we saw.
Right, especially when specifically the last, third of the season, it was pretty evident that he was kind of just going through the motions, clearly a little bit aggravated, to say the least.
So unless he just he's just done with Chicago and gets a nice offer from the Chiefs to be their wide receiver too. Not necessarily. Don't think he's coming back. Last thing really to highlight, I thought, was Braxton Jones' comments. Right, Poles really didn't commit to him being a starter. He said, "I thought Braxton did a good job. I was proud of the progress. He did a nice job of continuing to get better. I do believe he's a starting left tackle, but if it comes down to a situation to increase competition and that's what's best for us, we'll do that." I mean, there's a couple of really, really good left tackles in the draft that you could potentially snag at pick 9.
Yeah, if Joe Alt or Olufashanu falls, why not?
So I think the reason I highlighted this quote is because I think it continues to show that Poles is not a emotional, hey, I found this guy in the 5th round, so he's our guy, and I'm going to fall in love with him. I think he's going to consistently make what the action that's best for the Bears.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here. Then we're going to pop into some confidence, and then finally these offensive coordinator candidates. Confidence meter. Basically just a couple of things. This is going to be a pretty quick session. I'm going to say a name. Danny, you tell me on scale of 0 to 10. 0 being not confident whatsoever. 10 being super duper confident. In terms of this person or this category's standing in the team, and we'll say just over the next year.
Okay.
So Ryan Poles, how confident are you in him that what he's doing is the right direction that we're headed?
Before the whole way the coach retention went down, I probably would have said 8 or 9. I'm probably closer to a 6.5 or a 7 at the moment. Looks like Mason saw a bug in his bourbon.
Oh, I see. Like, first of all, it's rye, but you were close. And I don't know, there's like little stringy things. But to be fair, I did smoke it before the show, so it could just be some of that.
Could be that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a cherry wood smoke.
Ooh, jealous.
Matt Eberflus, confidence.
Oh my God. So I'm probably skewed because I genuinely don't think Eberflus is a complete and total moron. I think he's a solid football coach who's just limited. Like, I know you and I were talking offline, like texting each other.
It just sounds like what you say about your kid who like just isn't doing really well in math. It's like he's really really nice kid. I swear he's smart. He's just limited.
It's like you're trying to set your buddy up with one of your wife's friends or whatever. Like, she's really nice,
just limited.
Just limited. Like, but we were texting each other. Like, can you see the confetti falling down around Matt Eberflus?
Yeah.
And I really, really struggle with seeing the confetti falling down around that guy. Could it? Sure. Maybe this becomes Sean McDermott with a new offensive play caller and a quarterback, or a new quarterback, or Justin's potential ascension.
Sean McDermott doesn't have confetti.
No, he doesn't. But I'm just that's the closest comparison I got to Matt Eberflus.
And I think that's part of the reason why I struggle to see the confetti falling, because you don't see defensive coordinators really doing that. You don't see, like, if you had to name people right now who you see the confetti falling around, right? I mean, it's the Andy Reid, and it's not fair because you've seen success already. But I'm more likely to see Mike McDaniels holding that Lombardi trophy right now than I would Matt Eberflus.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard because right now I think the best coach in football is John Harbaugh, and I don't think it's particularly close at this moment in time. And that was a special teams guy, but that's not the here nor there. That guy's got 16 years of experience or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, he's talk about breaking the mold. Also, quick sidebar: how has no one else taken a shot on a special teams coordinator, seeing his success?
Because it's scary.
Like, seriously, I mean, that's not no one. Who was it? Was Joe Judge? Was he special teams?
Joe Judge was special teams. God, years back, Ditka was technically a special teamer if you want to go way in the Wayback Machine. Yeah. Bill Belichick cut his teeth as a special teams guy. So, I mean, so what you're saying is fire Eberflus, hire Bubba Ventrone. That's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing. Confidence in Kevin Warren. You can kind of take this whether it's the stadium, whether it's him overseeing the team, whatever.
Stadium, it's going to be a perfect 10 out of 10. I think he's going to get it done for what he wants. I think Kevin Warren is good at this part of it. He's a business guy by trade.
Yeah. Confidence
in anything else? TBD? Like, to be determined? I can't give you a number because I don't know. I don't know what is he doing besides, I mean, awesomely, donating $1 million to Lurie Children's Hospital. I mean, it's fantastic. Hey, shout out, because Lurie's helping out my wife and I with our current situation.
Fantastic stuff. I mean, like, so the visual, the confidence, the swagger, he's got more of that than Ted Phillips ever had, but so far we don't really know anything about it.
Also, much less sweat. Much less sweaty.
Last two here, offense. Again, we're going to, with what we know, which is not a lot, how confident are you that someone's going to come in here and make this a middle of the road offense?
I think the offense is further to go than a lot of people want to admit to themselves. Middle of the road, so you're saying like 16 to 18? Is that our benchmark?
Yeah, let's say 16 to 18.
I don't see why not if you're competent at this. Like, I don't think Luke Getsy was particularly good. Like, what?
Getsy was great at that opening script. Like, he was great.
The first 15 to 20 plays were awesome.
And then it's like he just couldn't react. He couldn't change.
5.5, 6. I don't think it's that far off, because I think the Bears aren't that many pieces away, but it's not as close to being elite as a lot of people maybe could portray it to be.
Yeah. Well, now we're going to move on to these offensive coordinator options. Part of the press conference, when asked about, why Getsy was let go and then what Eberflus is looking for, Getsy said the growth and development of the offense to me needed to be better than it was. And then when searching for a new offensive coordinator, Eberflus said the most important quality he will look for is someone who is a great teacher. He thinks it's important because he has to coach the coaches that coach the position. I think that's the number one trait of any coach. You have to be able to have the innovation to really look at the players that you have and be able to help enhance and put those guys in a position to succeed and to get explosive and move the ball down the field. So I bring that up simply because when you look at, you might not be able to see this, and if you're listening to the podcast, I would tune in to check it out on YouTube, or you can go to ontapsports.net.com/Bears/Matt Eberflus. I'm going to put a link somewhere. But basically go to ontapsports.net.com and look up Eberflus future head coach Bears candidates, because I snagged this from our friend of the podcast, Butkiss Stats Q. He did a really good, when the Bears were looking to hire a head coach, he did a bunch of profiles on the candidates. One of them was Matt Eberflus. This list in particular is highlighting some of the connections that Eberflus has both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And the problem that you have if you actually do look at this list is, while there's a lot of offensive coordinator options or connections, there's really no one that you're going to look at this list and say, hey, that person could be or should be the offensive coordinator of the Bears. I mean, some of them are either just too old at this point, like in near death, like Wade Wilson, and Jason Garrett basically should be dead to you for different reasons. You look at the younger side of the ball.
My man just killed Jason Garrett.
He's such a terrible coach. You look at the other side of the ball, or it's the other side of the spectrum with the younger individuals, like a Gerard Johnson, semi-interesting name, a Clayton Adams, a Luke Steckel, who's currently on the team, of course, already. Parks Frazier was an assistant QB coach with the Indianapolis Colts. They're just not names that reverberate in this potential cycle. And I think that's important to note, because in the past you tend to look at connections of who you're going to hire, but Poles even said he's going to be much more on top of this hiring process. So I think you can almost ignore the connections in a way. I don't know if you would agree with that or not.
Maybe not ignore, but don't put as much emphasis on.
So yeah, you don't necessarily have to say, well, Flus didn't ever cross with either this person or someone that works directly above this person, just because, one, we saw what that led to Luke Getsy, which I said when that happened, that was bad. It was rushed. Basically, they interviewed Pep Hamilton, said thank you for meeting the Rooney Rule, and hired Luke Getsy. It was wild. And like I said, Poles is going to have a much more hands-on approach to this process. And as a part of that, we're now going to look at our head coach. We have one. Our offensive coordinator options. And Danny's first option was Darrell Bevell, quarterbacks coach and passing coordinator for the Miami Dolphins.
Okay, so I want to preface this by saying any and all names you see me bring up are because I just have no confidence in them to go get one of these young, bright guys. They're going to have to settle for someone who's mid, as the kids say. And I find Darrell Bevell, frankly, kind of interesting. He does have a connection to a coach on staff, and that's offensive lineman Chris Morgan. Like it or not, he should be accredited with developing Russell Wilson. He was the play caller for the back-to-back Super Bowl runs in the Legion of Boom era in Seattle. And now he's spending time as the assistant quarterbacks coach, or the passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach in Miami under Mike McDaniel. I think he's fascinating in that I don't think even if he's really good at this, should he get another shot to call plays here in Chicago, that he's really in any danger of being poached. He's in his mid-50s. I think the offense he'd run is going to be probably considered pretty basic, not reinventing the wheel kind of thing. He's going to run what he knows how to run with maybe some wrinkles from what he's picking up under Mike McDaniel in Miami. And I also just find it fascinating that he's got other stops now other than just calling the offense for Russ and relying a lot on the coming of age of Russ and vintage beast mode, right? He's been in Detroit. He's been in Jacksonville. He's got other stops and he's got learning experiences along the way. And any good employee, any good coach, any whatever in life will tell you always learn more from failing than you do from success. I'd be interested to see with what he's now learning in the most innovative offense in the NFL, coupled with his prior knowledge of successes and failures, what he would look like now, especially with the continuity of an offensive line coach that he has a connection to in Chris Morgan.
If you want someone learning from failures, hire Luke Getsy. No, can't bring him back. Bell was really interesting, obviously. Like the reason he wasn't on my list at this stage was I have a hard time separating how much is him versus how much is just Mike McDaniel's like just running it. So, and there's other people on this list that might have that problem too. But just the general thought process of like, Mike McDaniel's offense. But I mean, that you could actually strike that a little bit because you can go back to Mike McDaniel because Kyle Shanahan was calling it and Mike McDaniel's wasn't. So we don't know how much input Bevel has on the offense. And you're only going to know that based on the interview and who you talk to, which will be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. My turn. I have Eric Bieniemy, who is currently the offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders / assistant head coach. So he's an interesting case for a variety of reasons. Early on, he had jobs at the University of Colorado and the Vikings before ending up with the Chiefs in 2013 as a running backs coach. In 2018, he was promoted to the offensive coordinator to replace Matt Nagy. Bieniemy's first season as the Chiefs offensive coordinator, the Chiefs were first in the NFL in yards per game and points scored. The Chiefs scored the third most points in a season in the NFL history with 565. Additionally, Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes became the second quarterback in NFL history, along with Peyton Manning, to throw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns in a season. And so then Bieniemy left the Chiefs, try to get out of that Andy Reid shadow, because like I was just kind of alluding to the Bevel, how much is Reid versus how much was Bieniemy during that process. Sam Howell led the league in passing yards in his second season, but Howell was later benched for Jacoby Brissett. Poles spent 9 seasons with Bieniemy when they were with the Chiefs. It's interesting, right? Because Poles, as you talked about, Danny, didn't interview Bieniemy in 2022 for the head coaching job. So if he was infatuated with him, you'd think that he'd be at least brought in. How much leeway did Poles have? We talked about that already. Whole different conversation. Maybe it's different for head coach versus OC. Does he believe he'd be a good OC / assistant head coach, but not a full-time head coach? Potentially. Some cons. He had some legal issues. He was arrested along with Carl, a teammate, following a bar fight in 1988 between 1989 and 1991. I was going to say,
let's note that most of these, I believe, are 25 to 30 something years.
These are old. I'm just bringing these up why some people have some trepidation.
And the reason why they should be brought up for trepidation is because of what just happened in Hallis Hall this past year with specifically Alan Williams and the murkiness behind what may or may not have happened.
Yeah. So there was a couple of traffic violations in there. There was a no contest to a whole firefighter thing where he basically was like preventing him performing duties. And then in 93, again, this is 1993, he was allegedly harassed a female parking attendant. So I bring that up because those are some of the cons people talk about with Bieniemy. They also bring up apparently he's not a very good interviewer and it comes off a little pompous in those interviews. Like I don't need to prove that I need to be here. I don't think you spend that much time under Andy Reid and have Sam Howell have the success he had and be a part of Patrick Mahomes' sustained success during that time period without knowing a thing or two and being able to work with these different kinds of quarterbacks. I think that's big, right? Because I don't want the best quarterback or offense coordinator for Justin Fields. I don't want the best offensive coordinator for Caleb Williams or anything. I want the best offensive coordinator, period, no matter who comes in, because you're just a damn good teacher.
Yeah, I mean, I have no issue with Bieniemy as a thought or idea. I think it's just a very hard sell.
One of the reasons to Bieniemy or to someone else?
To Bieniemy.
Oh,
I think he's just a
reasons,
hard sell to the Bears to hire him.
I think one of the reasons this might work, right, is because Ron Rivera is fired. So Bieniemy's probably going to get a couple head coaching interviews, I would think. So you probably wouldn't be able to hire him very quickly. So that might be a negative too. But he's one of those ones where he's called plays before. He's had success with those plays. It's just this rare thing where he hitched his wagon, unfortunately, to a Ron Rivera. Does he want to do that again with Matt Eberflus? Yeah, that might be a tough sell, but I don't know how many. If he doesn't get a head coaching gig, what other offensive coordinator position is more attractive?
I don't know. I also just don't think he's going to have people banging down his door. It doesn't seem like he's very well liked anywhere he goes. Like whether it be pompous, maybe he's gruff. I don't know what. I genuinely don't know what it is.
And if anyone knows, it's going to be Poles, right?
Right.
If Poles doesn't bring him in for an interview,
it's possible. It's possible Brian Poles can't stand the guy.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know. In a vacuum, with what we know about Eric Bieniemy, he probably should be a head coach already.
But something's going on.
Something's going on, but absolutely bring him in, talk to him. Why not? I would not dislike the hire of Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator. I think he could do much worse.
He's my number 2 guy if I had to kind of rank them right now. So next we got Frank Reich.
Okay, so this one is the pure connection one. Eberflus and Frank Reich know each other. Like, know each other. I think they spent 3 years in Indy together before Eberflus got the call to be the head guy of the Bears. I think it's also easy to look back on what most recently transpired in Carolina and be like, this guy sucks. And I just think that's a little short-sighted in that you can't just use recency bias of Carolina and what happened under David Tepper as reasons to just crucify him and any and all probability of even talking to the guy as a potential offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator under Doug Peterson the year they won the Super Bowl, when they had to transition from Carson Wentz, who was under his tutelage, along with Doug Peterson. And I don't even want to give any credit to John DeFilippo. I think he's been banished from the NFL.
Remember how cool John DeFilippo was?
Yeah. And then the transition to Nick Foles. Like, he did some good things. And I also think we forget that how well he had twilight career Phillip Rivers playing in Indianapolis for a spell. Like, it wasn't his fault that necessarily that the Colts kept wanting to try and just compete and going to get these twilight.
I'm just bringing up Q's comment. No, Danny, everything in Indy was clearly fraudulent, and Reich is clearly bad at all things football.
Q, go away.
At Bucket Stats, follow him on Twitter, and I also linked his the website where you can find those that Matt Eberflus profile. In the
my biggest trepidation with him is I think his offense might be a tad bit antiquated. It's very timing based, very short and medium passing game based. And there's been rumors he might just be done with football. Guys in his early 60s, early mid 60s, and does he want to keep coaching and doing the day-to-day grind thing? I mean, because if he's being brought in here, I'd assume that Eberflus, while he would probably spend time in the rooms, would probably just let Frank do his thing. Because it's a trust factor. You know he probably trusts him.
And I think that'll be really interesting. That's another layer. If you got one of these guys, maybe a Frank Reich, maybe an Eric Bieniemy, you could continue that just assistant head coach, throw that tag on. And that would allow Eberflus to really focus on the defense, because while he's still going to be involved in the offense, he could kind of step back more and be like, no, my assistant head coach has this.
Right. All right. I think that pretty much covers Reich, right?
Yeah, I mean that's him for sure. You know, it is interesting. I mean, Q joked about it, but like the main reason Frank Reich was done in Indy was because he went to bat for Carson Wentz, and the Wentz thing didn't work, and that wasn't a Reich issue. I mean, he backed the wrong horse, but I mean, Wentz had his injury stuff. Wentz had his weird some locker room stuff where teammates didn't particularly like him in Indy for reasons I'm not going to get into. You know, there's stuff going on there that wasn't Reich. And then you go to the Panthers, like you were talking about, and Tepper's an idiot. Tepper's a wild man. I want nothing. Would want nothing to do with him as an owner. But we've also, I think, seen, and it's only been 1 year, but we've heard like who wanted Stroud versus who wanted Young and all that. The whole thing was weird with the Panthers. So I think he does get a bit of a bad rap.
It was very strange.
I personally still don't want him because, like you were, I don't know, just the age. I think he's a little washed. It's
the age and how much can he transition his offense to what these quarterbacks are going to become.
Yeah, but so if your polls, your Eberflus, and you're like, man, we got to get this coordinator right. I don't know that you go with a guy who just had trouble developing the first overall pick. Clint Kubiak is my next one. Currently passing coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. So
I tried to find a picture of him with Brock Purdy. It wasn't in my favor.
Danny did a great job with the visuals, with just comparing these, and apparently Brock Purdy just doesn't like to take pictures with Clint Kubiak. So, also, by the way, for some reason in my brain, because I saw Broncos when you first texted me and said I couldn't find a picture with Brock, I thought Osweiler for a half second, and I was like, why would that matter?
Well, Brock Osweiler would be about 8 inches taller than Russ.
I'm going to put my best car salesman voice on here. Do you want the Kyle Shanahan McVay scheme? Well, look no further than the Mike Shanahan Gary Kubiak tree with Clint Kubiak. Clint Kubiak was hired by his dad in 2016 with the Broncos and then was kept by Vance Joseph. He joined his father again in Minnesota as the Vikings quarterbacks coach in 2019. Gary Kubiak was the assistant head coach under Mike Zimmer, and Kevin Stefanski was the offensive coordinator. Now, Stefanski left the Browns in 2020, for the Browns, in 2020. Gary Kubiak became the offensive coordinator, and then in 2021, he retired. Son replaced him as Vikings offensive coordinator and play caller for 1 year. That season, Kirk Cousins passed for 4,221 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and with a 103.1 passer rating. After a year spent on Nathaniel Hackett's staff with the Broncos in 2022, where following offensive struggles to start the 2022 season, it was announced that Hackett would relinquish play calling duties to Kubiak. Kubiak then returned to the coaching tree as Kyle Shanahan's passing coordinator in San Francisco. So this is a purely who do you know kind of a thing for me, where do you want it, like I said, a taste of that McVay Shanahan tree, and he's been under a lot of very successful people. Gary Kubiak, obviously, he's right in his ear. He was a big part of that Kirk Cousins great year, but how much of that was just Kirk already being Kirk and the foundation already being there, right? When he just took over. But, he's still a younger guy. That would be obviously right for him. That would be a promotion going from passing coordinator to offensive coordinator. He could be someone that gets some consideration for head coaching gigs, but I think just because of the other young individuals like a Brian and a Ben Johnson, the Harbaugh stuff, and you have Bill Belichick available now, things like that, like he might fall by the wayside a little bit. So again, kind of like Eric Bieniemy, you might not get him right away. He might be a later hire than you might want. So that might be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, and you also always have to wonder how much of this is just being attached at the hip to his dad and now Kyle Shanahan, and they're just using all the like-minded voices and terminology in terms of the system to just ease transition of like plays and infighting of the plays or the play designs and stuff like that. I don't know if Clint Kubiak is bad or good, for the record. I genuinely don't know. I think he'd be one of the more interesting guys you could hire because he could be awesome. He also could bomb.
And that's absolutely the case. So that's the risk you're running with him. But definitely an interesting name. He was like my third on my list. I'm saving my top one for the end here. But moving on now, Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator of the LA Chargers previously and of the Dallas Cowboys previously.
So this one I'm very conflicted on. I could make the case that he's my favorite. I could make the case that he's my least favorite. He runs a different system than a lot of guys do in the NFL at this moment in time. He does a lot more of the bombs away, let's go F it, fling it deep kind of thing, whereas a lot of guys are going to the, zone-based running, methodical passing attack, just this, that, the other. But then you look at the other side of it, and while I know he's well respected in NFL circles, like people in the NFL apparently love Kellen Moore. Dak actively got better after he left.
Yep.
The Chargers offense under Justin Herbert, and I get he had the rib thing this year, right, where he was playing with like broken rib cartilage or whatever.
Yes.
So
yes,
Herbert, I believe, had one of his not quite as productive seasons in comparison to previous years of his career. But the whole where do you want to put the blame on that, where it was just a dumpster fire being headed by a guy who knew his fate was certain if he didn't win the playoff game this year on Brandon Staley? Like, I genuinely don't know. I think he could be a really interesting hire, but I also feel like his system, while I may enjoy watching it from a film standpoint, is also a much harder system to transition quarterbacks into because it requires a much more, I don't want to say classic, but more almost like a risk take, a guy willing to just say F it and throw it every now and again. And I don't know how easy that is to coach into somebody.
I mean, and that's interesting too, because even that is a little, and I was going to bring up the points you did, just exact same thing. Like Dak got better with him leaving. Herbert, depending on how you look at the injury and the team as a whole, got worse with him showing up. But just kind of that F it, throw it thought process. Let's say you're the Bears and you draft Caleb Williams. Is that a thought process you want to have, knowing he already tends to put on that superhero cape and just does kind of plays outside of the system already? Do you want an offensive coordinator that's going to promote more of that? Because in theory, that isn't what happened with, like, let's say a Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid did the opposite, where he said, well, this is how we get you to play in structure and then allow you to go YOLO when we need it.
And one more thing is, I think Matt Eberflus, I could be wrong on this, was the passing game coordinator / defensive coordinator during Kellen Moore's final season as a player. I might have the connection mixed up, but I think they know each other through something. And I also believe, I want to say Kellen Moore is an athlete's first client, which is something we need to also be aware of. The athlete's first connection.
As a side thing, I'm so over that whole, like, I get it. That's what makes the world go round. Who knows who and all that jazz. But, like, I just hire the best person. Who cares if they're in the same damn agency?
But that we're just coming. But this is the talking point we're going to keep coming back to. I don't think you can get the best ones.
I'm stuck. I can see why you would say that, but at the same time, like, the chance to not just coach the player that's one, which would propel you to head coach chances, but the chance to be in the room saying, this is the person I want as the quarterback that we should take. Like, that's huge.
I agree. I think it's all checks and balances, right? For every positive that you're going to bring up, I could cite the negative.
Yeah, but I'm right, so that's all that matters.
Yeah, well, of course you are. You're the one with the PhD, not me.
We joke. All right, so my favorite candidate is someone we didn't think would be available, and someone that Football CF Candy asked about earlier, Shane Waldron, offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Pete Carroll was shown his AARP card and said, goodbye. We'd like you to show you the door. So, and they're allowing all of their staff to look elsewhere.
He actually borrowed Bayless's AARP card, for the record.
I'm never ready for this. It's a whole different... I need these to be like in a different panel because I have to move to get to it. So now Shane Waldron began his NFL as an operations intern in 2002 and then returned to the Patriots in 2008 as an offensive quality control coach, then tight end coach in 2009. 2016, he was hired by the then Redskins, now Commanders, as offensive quality control coach. Who else was on that staff in 2016? Lots of people that matter. In 2017, tight end coach under Sean McVay. 2018, named passing game coordinator after Matt LaFleur became the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. In 2019, Shane Waldron was promoted to quarterbacks coach after Zach Taylor was named head coach by the Bengals. They spent the last 3 years as offensive coordinator and play caller for Seattle Seahawks, who has been a part of that Geno Smith resurrection, one could say. Since Waldron's tenure, the Seahawks offense has ranked 10th in EPA per play, 12th in EPA per dropback, 11th in dropback success rate, again with Geno Smith at the helm, DK Metcalf, and kind of a bunch of the rest of it. Advanced analytics also like Shane. According to Stephen Patton of Patton Analytics, You can check out his Twitter. He posted this. When you look at the rankings of offensive play callers after Week 18 in terms of personnel and market efficiency with team constraints, Waldron ranks 9th. Compare that to Luke Getsy, who ranks 27th, or even head coach candidates like Ben Johnson, who ranks 8th. Bobby Slowick ranked 19th. He's way down that list. So technically, I mean, Shane Waldron did better than them in that deep analytic thought process. This is one of those situations where I think I can see where you're probably going to say you're probably not going to get him for these various reasons. Is he going to get a head coach look, or is he going to get a better office coordinator look? But it's rare that you're going to get a guy like this. He was only on the street because Pete Carroll was shown the door. His offense, the connections to McVay, the connections to that whole Redskins staff. It's something that I think the Bears really need to consider, and that's why the Bears also have already requested to interview him.
Yeah, he is the only interview request, to my knowledge, that we know of at this moment in time. Would I love for them to get him? Absolutely. I think that's about the best you can get. That's a top third of the league play caller, just on the streets ready and being told, hey, you can go find your next job. That being said, I could see him waiting it out to accept an offensive coordinator job because I think he's going to get some head coaching calls too to interview just based on his successes. We just haven't really heard them yet because a lot of these teams, aside from the Commanders, are kind of early in their process of interviewing guys and putting together their list because they literally just can't interview some of the best candidates till after the divisional round.
Yeah, that shift is and is that true for head coach and coordinator positions or just head coach?
I think it's just head coach, but I could be wrong on that.
But of course, that'll affect the candidates who might get an interview or two for head coach.
Correct. So in an ideal world, yeah, Shane Waldron, great. I don't know if he's going to accept necessarily that right away. And
that's when that's almost the good news, I think, is that a lot of these candidates, and that's why I said this offseason is so weird, whether it's the Shane Waldrons, whether it's the Frank Reichs, whether it's the Eric Bieniemys, all these things, you have some people that have that combination of they weren't like necessarily fired for being terrible. It was just weird circumstances. And you can wait to hire that. You don't have to hire someone this week. You're fine waiting a bit. Like if you're the Bears, at least I think so. In addition to that,
you're probably fine waiting a minute. Yeah.
Throwing them hey, I can give you the assistant head coach title. I can throw you some extra cash on top of that. You get to coach either. What are your thoughts on Justin Fields? Okay, maybe you're not a fan of Justin. Well, you get to coach 1-1 and you can be a head coach candidate in a year or two if you are able to help develop this person.
Yeah, that's a great pitch. I totally get that. And maybe I'm just being cynical. I just have
you're a Bears fan. You have to be.
I just can't get to this place of your coach has a 2-year deal. Why am I going to agree to sign on with you? Especially when Shane Waldron's not going to be cheap. That's not going to be a cheap coordinator to hire. And Eberflus is making, $4 million a year? You're going to pay your coordinator $3 million? Do you want to enable what happened with Dirk Cotter and Lovie Smith? These are all factors you have to consider.
All factors you have to consider. It's tough. I think the Bears as a whole, George McCaskey, Ryan Poles, Kevin Warren, the way that they talk, at least we'll see how they walk, but the way that they talk is they are willing to do what needs to get done to create the best team they can. And I don't think you do that without one of these names that we're talking about. You don't do that with the tier B, then hope it works out.
Mm-hmm.
But again, maybe that's just me. That's me being more hopeful on that spectrum.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with hope. God, I hope they get Shane Waldron. That's the best you can probably do. Otherwise, you're looking at one of these coordinators we brought up who are former play callers and out of work for a reason. Or you're going to be looking to guys who have never even tried this before at the NFL level. Think of Liam Cohen's name. I know people have brought up before who's the Kentucky play caller for the Wildcats in college. Another name that was in Indianapolis and crossed over is Marcus Brady. He's currently an offensive analyst or something in Philadelphia. But does anyone want to touch a Philadelphia assistant right now? I'll be the first one to say I was pretty big into Brian Johnson, and then you got to wait for more data points to stack up. You got to get more analysis, and the more you watched it, the more it fell apart. It's like this guy needs more time. You can't just.
I really don't want somebody that hasn't called plays before. Like
neither do I.
I don't want the Marcus Brady.
You can afford that.
Marcus Brady, Eagles senior offensive. I'm just looking off the list now. Eagles senior offensive assistant. He isn't. Plus, that Eagles offense has not been good, as you just talked about. Brian Callahan with the Bengals. He's an offensive coordinator, but he doesn't call plays. We talk about Mike LaFleur.
Why would Brian Callahan leave?
Oh,
like you're gonna leave Joe Burrow?
Well, yes. Well, you would leave because you have a chance to call plays and build your resume. That's the reason you would leave. Zach Robinson's another name on there, like the Rams passing game coordinator. Like he could be great. There's nothing to go off of. It's a tree. You're betting on a tree.
And truth be told, I don't think Zach Taylor's that good. And you bet on the tree.
Yeah,
he's just got Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I think Taylor sucks.
I'm not going to get into my Zach Taylor rant though.
No, I'm saying no. The brakes, guys. Why aren't the brakes working?
Because I cut the brakes. Wild card, bitches! Yeah! What?
That brings us to our wild card option. Dan and I both said that we have to talk about this. Greg Roman, former offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. This is we're keeping Justin Fields one in all reality. I mean, you're not bringing him in and drafting someone. So if they were to hire Greg, they've played their hand. Why would Greg Roman work here in Chicago, Danny?
So it's funny to say. I remember because there was a time like even the Eberflus hire cycle where I was like, I can justify seeing this as a viable head coaching candidate because of what he is truly elite at the thing he does well. He is the probable, if not arguable, best offensive run designer in the NFL who's not actually in the NFL right now. And this was even before he was coaching high school football, which is what he's doing right now. Like the way he designs runs, how he gets the quarterback involved in the runs, there's no one else who does this as well as he does. That being said, the only thing he's really good at designing passing game-wise is getting his tight ends open. He's very painfully limited. It's like NAIA level play calling of offensive passing schemes. It's not good. Because you call that, you're very hyper-specific to one kind of quarterback, and you're very capped at what your offense can become. That being said, I know everyone likes to shit on him almost. Lamar Jackson won an MVP under him, throwing to Willie Snead as his number one target. The guy has never had an offensive DVOA under 15 in all his years calling plays for the Niners and the Baltimore Ravens. He is very, very good at what he does. The offensive brand football he calls is not aesthetically pleasing. It is effective, but it's limited and it's capped. This is the either if he's brought in his OC, I could totally see him being the reason to keep Justin. That being said, I also can foresee a scenario if it were to go this way where I had a little birdie tell me they went very hard after Greg Roman this past offseason to add on to Luke Getsy's staff to make him to put him in some sort of position on the staff. I don't know if it was like a Phil Snow type position, if it was a run. I don't know. All I know is they went hard after him, but the Ravens were paying him $2.5 million to go away. And he probably just wanted to take a year off after everything that was going on in Baltimore. It's stressful for these coaches. So as an offensive coordinator, I'm probably balking at it, but if I think what could happen happens, where you bring him in as like a senior offensive advisor, run game coordinator, go nuts.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because like I said to start this section off, you're definitely not bringing him in thinking like, hey, we're drafting a quarterback. I mean, you could pretend to, but that's not happening. If you did bring him in, I think you have to hire like a passing game coordinator to be in charge of that, and just and Greg has to be okay with saying, okay, this is you. So maybe you are going to the Shanahan tree of someone that's looking to step up in the world from one of those intern assistants or whatever, and you think they could do something like that. Lamar didn't seem to miss him too much when Roman left. I mean,
and that's
Lamar's
also because two-pronged. The weapons are better outside of Mark Andrews than they've ever been. And Monken's a really good football coach.
And I was going to say, I mean, I remember a game I was sitting in the press box watching a Tyler Huntley-led Ravens team take a dookie on the Bears under Greg Roman. So that matters. He was from San Francisco to the Buffalo Bills to the Ravens was his path. He's produced a top 5 rushing offense in every season but one that he's been an offensive coordinator. The outlier was the number 8 rushing offense in 2011 with the 49ers. His best passing offense was 13th in 2021, and his second best was 23rd in 2002 with the 49ers. So that's Greg Roman. I mean,
he's painfully limited, but the thing he does well, he's absolutely elite at.
So one of the problems that Danny's brought up throughout this, for a lot of these individuals potentially being an offensive coordinator, is, are you attaching yourself to as we talked about, a lame duck head coach, whether it's 2 years or so? If you're the Bears and you're sitting there and you're struggling to find an offensive coordinator, or you're sitting there and you're saying, you know what, we are going to roll with Justin because we have a trade offer from the Patriots to move up who's sitting at 3 right now? Sorry, the Commander. Who's at 3?
3 is the Patriots, 2 is the Commanders.
The Patriots moved from 3 to 1, and it's blowing our minds out of the damn door. Yeah, we can make Justin work for that. Like, that's the way this works, but you're making this hire sooner rather than later. You're not waiting very long.
Right.
So one last thing before we get out of here. Is there one offensive coordinator name you've heard floating around out there that you would hate? Someone you would just be like, what are we doing here?
Not really. There hasn't been one. Oh, no, I take that back. Cliff Kingsbury offends the hell out of me.
I literally have written right. That's the name I've written here. Cliff Kingsbury.
Cliff Kingsbury offends the absolute hell out of me. Static offense. He and Caleb apparently, I think was reported, did not see eye to eye at USC. It's why he left USC after a year, right? Like, I'm not making that up in my brain. He's gone. He's no longer a Trojans coach.
I think so. Something like that.
Like, and I get you don't, and you want to talk about a tell. If you hire Cliff Kingsbury to be your football coach,
you're drafting Caleb Williams.
You're drafting Caleb Williams. And if I'm remembering that correctly, you're hiring a coach you already know they don't like each other. What? What are we doing? Yeah, no. The idea of Cliff Kingsbury offends the absolute hell out of me.
It's
handsome man, seems like a good enough dude. Stay away from my football team.
It's the low-hanging fruit. I mean, yes, he's got NFL experience as a head coach of 4 seasons. Yes, Kyler Murray was named to 2 Pro Bowls under his watch. 2021, Murray's was third in the NFL, which was Murray's third in the NFL. He ranked 2nd in completion percentage and 7th in QBR. All of that is true, but there also was a hard fall off with the Cardinals. There's all that funkiness going on with Caleb at USC. It's a name connection. It wasn't even a person connection. It doesn't even make any sense.
Agreed.
All right.
That being said, one last thing I wanted to throw out on Waldron that I found really interesting floating around the Twixterverse earlier. He runs the most 13 personnel of any offensive play caller in the league.
Oh my God.
And that just, because I'm just anyone who follows me on draft Twitter or whatever knows I'm an absolute caricature of myself. There are certain things I like. If you're going to run and put out tight end heavy sets, you're probably going to have me as a fan just because I think no one else does it anymore and it's fun. Is it a way to build your offense? No, absolutely not. But when you're running it at 13% of the time, it at least adds a wrinkle that you don't see very often anymore.
Okay, I know we're supposed to get out of here, but now you've sparked a question in my brain. So let's say Shane Waldron was hired as offensive coordinator.
Bring back Mercedes Lewis.
That was going to be part of the question. You draft, I don't care. You draft a quarterback at 1, whichever one that might be.
Bowers at 9.
That was going to be like my question.
Absolutely.
Are you taking Bowers at 9, even though he's like a power slot?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh my God. There's a couple people who I know's brain would explode at that, not from excitement, but from sadness. But I think that would be fun.
Oh, could you imagine like Cole Kmet, Brock Bowers, and then like say for some reason Greg Roman agrees to be his running game coordinator with how all the stuff he designs for tight ends? Just fun.
Just fun stuff.
It's not going to happen, but it's fun. So one question then for you.
Mhm.
Just at this moment, we all hear things. We've all made friends that can sometimes say a little birdie said something to us.
Yeah.
Who would you say, or what is your prediction for how the offensive coordinator hire goes?
In terms of who it is or the process?
Like who it is. Like right now, you have to make a prediction. Who do you think is going to be hired as the offensive coordinator?
I'm gonna say Shane Waldron.
You think they're going to land him? Good.
I think they're gonna land him for a combination of a couple things. Some things I will say, some things I won't. But just in terms of, I think there's just right now the mentality of the people making decisions is different than it has been in the past in this Bears front office, and they see an opportunity that's there, and so therefore financially, clout wise, etc., a push will be made. Whether that push is accepted is the question mark.
Okay. My prediction is actually the man you have on the screen. I think it'll end up being Darrell Bevel.
Oh, look at that! Where it turned out right.
So it's just this is no birdie thing. I could see a world where, because of the style of football he plays or he calls, specifically from the biggest sample size we have back in the Legion of Boom days, that's actually where I could see the Greg Roman thing playing out as a senior assistant and run game coordinator.
That would be very interesting. Well, that's what we got for you. Hopefully y'all enjoyed this. We will touch base in terms of what we're ultimately going to be doing here for Bare Bones moving forward. Probably a little break, honestly, unless some crazy news drops that we need to talk about. We will do some mock drafts. I don't know if we'll do it as heavy as we did last time for a variety of reasons, but we will be around during this off season for sure. Maybe we'll get to do some combine stuff. I'm trying to make things happen. We'll see. But other than that, anything you have to add, Danny, before we get out of here?
No, I mean, next time I'm on one of these shows, chances are my little girl will be here, and my wife and I will be raising our little baby. So
yay, everyone!
And
say
shout out
congrats to Danny. Yay!
Shout out to the job, man. 12 weeks of paternity leave. Get to be home with my wife and kid for a little bit.
Oh, think about all the film you're gonna get to watch,
dude. I'm so excited. Get to hold my little girl, teaching her how to watch football film. It's gonna be great.
That's a dig route.
This is called a dagger.
All right, everyone, bear the hell down.